gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian, Pace reporting live here at the Jazz Standard here in New York City. I had the honor and privilege of breaking bread with a very, very dynamic force, not only in jazz music, but also world music. Mr. Hugh Masekela made a very rare appearance here in New York City over the last couple of days, and he took place in the first inaugural International Jazz Day, which took place at the UN, as well as he's concluding 2 nights here at the Jazz Standard, featuring his dear friend Mr. Larry Willis on piano. In fact, both of them have a brand new CD called Friends, and it's 4 CDs of both of them interpreting some dynamic standards as well as contemporary classics as well. Mr. Masekela and I sat down and talked about the importance of International Jazz Day. We talked about the new CD, and we also talked about him growing up in South Africa and how he's exposed to jazz music. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this very special edition of the Pace Report on the legendary Hugh Masekela, live here at the Jazz Standard here in New York City. Congratulations, Mr. Masekela. This is a big week for you. International Jazz Day here in New York City. 2 nights at the Jazz Standard with the legendary Larry Willis on piano. In addition to that, you have this brand new CD. 3 CDs set. 4. Hugh Masekela, Larry Willis Friends. You must be tired right now.
You only really tired when you die. And anybody who's tired walking around needs their head examined. Because, I mean, you know, when you're alive, you're supposed to live. And sleeping is also not good for you. Resting is good. So I don't live in that mind frame of exhaustion. I think it's a disability.
Tell me about this project. You and Larry got it together. He came to Johannesburg, and you guys decided to just put together some songs that you guys love and some new stuff. And this process is a long period because, I mean, it's 4 CDs worth of music.
Well, me and Larry know each other for 5 decades. We went to music school together here. And all the songs we did are songs that we've learned our craft through. It's part of like the material or the elements that we learned our craft through over the last 50 years. That's besides the bebop and the classical music we did at school. And we did a CD maybe about 8 years ago called Almost Like Being in Jazz, which was American standards. You know, we were trained on the American standard songbook. So it's a prerequisite for any so-called jazz musician if you don't know the tunes, because they call them like that. You know, when we used to have jam sessions, and you're not only supposed to know the tune, but the chords and the key. So you never really ask what key is it in, because you're supposed to know. So we have an anthology of these songs. Most of the guys from our generation know all these songs. They all interpreted them differently. But we had a very great improvisational jazz teacher or guide or mentor by the name of John Mehigan, who like started us out in the 1960s when we were at music school. And like, these were necessary songs to know. So over the last 50 years, we've learned them all, and we've learned them backwards and upside down and all that. And Larry and I have done other records together. We started together. Our first groups that we played in was a group that got us a national attention, the Americanization of Ooga Booga. We did at the Village Gate in 1965 live, and it was produced by Tom Wilson, the late Tom Wilson, who produced a whole lot of other people before that. And he was one of the first African Americans to be a vice president of a record company. He produced Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Terry Thornton, Eddie Harris, you know, like all those Somewhere in the Night, and like the theme from Exodus that Eddie had. And they produced a whole lot of Frank Zappa, Herman's Hermits, etc., etc., and a lot of English groups too. But he just said, man, let's do it in the Village Gate live, you know, and we did our first album there with our quartet, and that's what started us off and took us to the world. But we did a thing in 1970 in England called Home is Where the Music Is, with Dudu Pukwane, the late Dudu Pukwane, and of course Eddie Gomez and Makaya and Choco. That's a masterpiece. You have to get that. If you don't have it, it's a double album. So we've explored the music world over and over, you know. We have a studio on my nephew in South Africa. One of my nephews built me a studio on his farm outside Pretoria. So the promoter of the International Cape Town Jazz Festival said, man, why don't we bring Larry, you know, and do Almost Like Being in Jazz at the festival. That was last year, so we did it. And my nephew had said, listen, there's this studio, because it was a surprise. He said, there's a studio for you. You do whatever you want to do with it. So when we finished, I said to Larry, listen, man, let's go and do some songs in the studio. So that's how it started. Larry came 4 times to South Africa last year. During that time, we did this 40-song album, 40-song box selection, yeah.
Mr. Masekela, you have really amassed a lot of the traditional jazz, but also music of your native Africa, South Africa. And I want to know how you've been able throughout your career, because when you came here, you studied jazz music at the Manhattan School of
And I studied classical music.
Classical music, okay.
Yes, yes.
You studied classical music, but I want to know how you were able to incorporate the music of your native Africa and get it to the point where fans really started enjoying your music, because you were married to Mary Makeba and she was doing a lot of positive things as far as bringing
Well, I
that.
learned a lot of. When I came here, I came as a bebop player, but I'd grown up in South Africa where we have a major cross section. Well, to take it back a little further, when I grew up, everybody had a gramophone, and they played it on their stoops. And everybody knew all the songs. We grew up with all the songs. But also South Africa is a potpourri of like Central and Southern Africa because of the migrant laborers that came from Angola and Namibia and Botswana and Swaziland and Lesotho and Mozambique and Malawi and Tanzania and Kenya and Zambia and Zimbabwe. And they all came to work in the industries, especially in the mines, and on weekends they would do their traditional stuff in their costumes. And in South Africa, that was a very big thing too, just internally. There was no television, so we had children's songs. There was wedding songs when it was going to be a wedding. A white flag would go up at the groom's and the bridegroom's house, and there's a whole anthology there with all the steps and choreography we did. We had choral Statfords competitions in school choir competitions, and we had a whole lot of unbelievable choral composers. So, and we had big bands and Dixieland bands. We had vaudeville groups and all that, because we were sort of like a Polaroid of African American life or urban life. Models were obviously the African American life that we saw on like sepia shorts in the movies. But we were the most avid collectors of African American music. And as kids, we could sing along with everybody from Count Basie to Glenn Miller to Sarah Vaughan to Ella Fitzgerald to Red Foley to the Mills Brothers to the Ink Spots. We knew everything that Jimmy Lunsford, Kev Shaw did, or Cap Calloway or Lucky Melinda or Glenn Miller or the Dorsey Brothers or Glenn Gray. We were walking anthologies. And then I was crazy about music from the time I was an infant. So there was no better place to grow up than South Africa. But I grew up taking in all these kinds of different music. When I played in township dance bands, we had to play weddings and we had to learn the wedding march and all kinds of other things. So you find that South African musicians really are very versatile. They can play any kind of music because the Spaniards, we come from a country that is a sponge for all kinds of music. And everybody came from all over the world to South Africa. They brought their wares. So we knew everything from O Sole Mio to You'll Be Dead when you'll be glad when you're dead, you rascal you, and Hi society. We could imitate, when I was 4 or 5 years old, we could all imitate Louis Armstrong. So it was easy to take in anything. Now, Miriam's mother and her grandmother were both traditional healers, and they're like anthologies of hundreds of traditional songs. When Miriam came here, she brought me the next year in 1960 to come to Manhattan School of Music with the help of Harry Belafonte she was touring with. And her and her daughter was 9 years old, were very happy to see me, but not because they'd missed me, but because they were missing a third part when they were singing all these songs that they learned from her mother. And they actually used to be in the gatherings, and the healing meetings. And I amassed a hell of a knowledge of those songs. And then I started to look back because everybody said, man, you come here playing bebop. There's thousands of us playing bebop. Miles, Dizzy, Belafonte, all of them said. So you're just going to be a statistic. But if you look into your own past, and where you come from and draw from that and mix it with whatever you know about jazz, you're going to come up with something. We don't know what it is yet, but it's going to be different. And that's how it morphed.
Growing up in South Africa, you hooked up with a dynamic musician by the name of Dollar Brand, a.k.a. Abdullah Ibrahim, and you guys formed the Jazzy Pistols. And you were the first African group to record a jazz record in South Africa.
An LP. Yeah, people, I mean, there were dance bands that recorded like township dance records, but we were the first contemporary music group. And we lived for music, day and night. We practiced during the day. We rehearsed all day and played all night. I think we slept 3 or 4 hours. We rested, we didn't sleep. But Jonas Gwangwa, a great trombone player from South Africa, who had also come to school here. Kipi Mweketsi, who was like our mentor, all of us, including Abdullah. And Makaya Nchoko, Johnny Gerse on bass, and Abdullah Ibra. Abdullah had actually come on tour with me and Kipi when we were playing on a tour for the Manhattan Brothers. Manhattan Brothers were like the Mills Brothers, sort of South Africa. Although they sang mostly native songs, but it was that style, the men quartet. And our keyboard player early in the tour, by the name of Todd Machikiza, who wrote a musical called King Kong about a boxer, which was the biggest, the first real big theatrical hit in South Africa that went to the West End for 2 years. He was a piano player, but they'd finally raised the money for him to come and finish writing the music for King Kong, and we were left without a piano player in Cape Town. So a guy by the name of Christopher Ngugani, they used to call him Christopher Columbus, was a saxophone player, tenor saxophone player. And there's a young guy here who plays a little cocktail piano in a hotel. Maybe you can check him out because he's really into township music as well. And that's how we found Abdullah Ibrahim. Then we went on a 5-month tour of the Eastern Cape with the Manhattan Brothers, and he was the piano player. And then after that, we joined King Kong, and he was just like loose. So he went to Cape Town and formed a trio with Makaya and Johnny Gerse. A year later, when we finished King Kong, me and Kipi and Jonas, we were in the band, in the pit. We called him and said, listen, man, we want to come down there and join you. And he said, take the next train. And we went down there. We didn't even know where we were going to stay. And we slept in the club for the first month. We rehearsed all day, played all night. You couldn't get into the club. And this was end of 1959. By the beginning of 1960, we recorded a jazz epistle, verse 1. And it became a classic in South Africa. You couldn't get into our concerts. And then we were just planning a national tour in March of 1960. Early 1960, February actually. And we're just about to go on that tour when the Sharpeville massacre happened. The country went up, in flames. People were demonstrating everywhere, and like the government declared a state of emergency, and the gatherings of more than 10 people were not allowed. So we couldn't perform anymore. And like 2 months later, a passport which I'd been waiting for 3 years, like trying to hustle, came through for me, and I left in May 19th of 1960. I left for England through a system that had been concocted by Bishop Trevor Huddleston, who got me my first trumpet, and who was expelled from South Africa in 1955 for convincing the Anglican diocese in South Africa to close all its African missionary schools rather than accept Bantu education, which was an inferior education designed for Africans. And he had been the biggest pain in the government, the Apartheid government's ass, and they finally asked his superiors in Yorkshire to call him back and recalled him. On his way back to England, he came through the States because they had missions here. And they came from Oxbridge, order of monks, and they were fellows of the Royal Scientist, or the Royal Geographical Society, the Royal Music Society. And one of these fellow monks was an outstanding classical clarinetist, but he had become a friend of Bunny Bigard. because he loved music. Bunny Bigard was playing at the time with Louis Armstrong. So he knew Louis. And so when Huddleston came, he said, listen, we're going to a concert where Louis Armstrong is playing, and you have to come with me because the clarinetist is my friend. And when Huddleston met Louis Armstrong, he told him about the band that they had started in South Africa, because he had gotten me my first horn. And other kids saw me playing, because I'd been a piano player since I was 5. So I got the trumpet quickly, and other kids, hey, Father, can I have a saxophone? So we formed the Huddleston Band. So when Huddleston met Louis Armstrong, he told him about the band, and Louis said, I got to send him one of my horns. So he sent us one of his horns, and we were even in the Farmers Weekly. And in those days, you didn't see black people in newspapers or magazines in South Africa, but like we were in the news for a whole year. Louis Armstrong in 1956 came to tour Africa, but he was banned from South Africa. Because people of color, of African origin, were not allowed into South Africa unless they were indentured servants or migrant laborers. You know, like the people I told you came to. Like when Canada Lee and Sidney Poitier came to do Cry the Beloved Country in South Africa, they came as Zoltan Quarter's servants, indentured servants. That's the only way they could come into South Africa. And it was, it was sort of secretly shot. So the irony was that, like, we were so famous because of Louis' trumpet, but he wasn't allowed to come into the country, and he came right up to Zimbabwe, which was southern Rhodesia then, and a lot of people like sort of smuggled themselves out of the country to go and see his concert there. But by the time we had formed the Huddleston Band, we were working anthologies of all kinds of music, African music, American music, waltzes, and and everything. And in 1956, the school was closed. The boarding school was declared a black spot. Now, what's funny is that in 1916. These monks bought that property, and they bought like a whole lot, thousands of hectares, and it became like the white suburb of Rosettenville. And this school was a seminar where Bishop Tutu went to the seminar at St. Peter's. But in 1953, actually, it was proclaimed a black spot. There was a Urban Areas Act, South Africa's story so long, which didn't allow black people to live in certain areas. So it was closed for that, and because it wouldn't accept Bantu education, which was this inferior education. And I went on the road then, and by the time I left school, I was sort of like starting to play with all the older guys like Kippy and then myself and Jonas, and we became part of the professional community of musicians. So for the next 4 years, we rode and surfed like the music world, me and Jonas, and in 1960 I left.
I'll wait for you, I'll slave for you, I'll be a beggar or a knave for you. If that isn't love, it'll have to do until the real thing comes along. I'd die for you, I'd lie for you, I'd pull the stars down from the skies for you. If that isn't love, it'll have to do until the real thing comes along. Oh. With all the words dear at my command, I really can make you understand. I love you always, darling, come what may. My heart is yours, what more can I say? I'd lie for you, I'd die for you, I'll tear the stars down from the skies for you. If that isn't love, it'll have to do until the real thing comes along.
You know, I'm a very, very big fan of a period from 1966 to 75. The first part of that time that I mentioned, you hooked up with a very important record producer by the name of Stuart Levine. And those records that you recorded with him and the record label that you guys eventually formed together kind of really set the foundation for, one, the Hugh Masekela sound, and two, it really kind of took your native African roots to commercial airplay in America.
Yeah, well, Stuart was a classmate of mine and Larry Willis's at St. Peter's. And he used to like contract bands for like the Larry Elgart band, you know, and like the Woody Herman band to go and play up in the mountains. And we were roommates when we were in school for a while. And around 1964, there were all these new independent production companies. And of course, we were also inspired by Motown. There was Buddha Records. The Beatles were coming out, you know, and like Aretha. I mean, all this kind of like new things were happening. People were breaking out. So we decided, well, why don't we form our own production company? And it was the time of James Bond. So our first company was 00 Buana Records. And we started, and when we started, Stuart was going to be the artist because I was signed to MGM. Stuart was going to be the artist, and we're going to have, because Stan Getz at the time was playing Brazilian music and he had a big breakout. So I said, Stuart, you play the saxophone, man. Why don't we try some South African and African music with you playing it, you know, because breaking African music, the record companies just, I mean, like Mort Nassiter, who was the president of MGM, and finally in 1966, I said, you know, I've done 2 albums, you know. Tom Wilson had already left MGM. I said, well, you know, what's happening? And he said, this music will never make it. You know, Mort Nassiter said, music will never make it. People, you know, what is it? People don't know what it is. So, in 1966, MGM forgot to pick up my option. You know, so then I became the first artist, and we moved to Los Angeles because I went to play at the Watts Jazz Festival, and the first Watts Jazz Festival, and about 10,000 people showed up because I'd had so much play from the Ooga Booga album that I'd done with Larry. So I said to Stuart, listen, man, I think that we got a potential audience here because I'm just like, I called my landlord, so I ain't coming back, I don't give a shit what you do, you know. And Stuart came over, and then we started Chisa Records, and I became the artist. And our first album was The Emancipation of Hugh Masekela, and that took off right away. Our next one, we did a cover of Up and Away, live at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and Up and Away went up to the top 40 on the charts. We never like recorded for the charts, you know. We just like doing like you say, like trying to like get this African music or whatever. Because I did a lot of pop songs, you know. At the same time, it was George Benson in Paris, and I said, he said, George Benson says, you know, we were the first to do pop songs, me and you know, to sing them too. So you know, like Wes Montgomery was just playing them on the guitar, but we said, yeah, so. We did Up and Away, and it went up to number 13 on the Billboard charts. Our next record was A Promise of a Future, and Russ Regan, who was the head of Uni by then, we had like gone to Uni Records because we couldn't afford to be an independent record company because you had to wait for 3 months, 90 days. Before you got paid, you know, and during that time you're traveling, you're promoting and what. So by the time Emancipation was flying, we owed $100,000, and in 1966, $100,000 was a lot of bread, you know, in 1967. So we went to uni. No, Russ Regan found us because uni was studying a label. And they had one rock little group, white group called Strawberry Alarm Clock. And they had a hit with that. But they wanted a catalog artist, you know. So he came to us and he said, I hear you guys are in trouble, you know. We're trying to form a record company, so why don't we work together? And that's how we started uni. I think the next artist after me at uni was Elton John. So we had done this Promise of a Future and we finished it, and like Russ Regan said, hey man, there's a song short here. They bought Emancipation, you know, and so there's a song short here. So I had just come back from Zambia, and friends had given me tapes and you know, and demos and all that. And El Abreu, may his soul rest in peace, you know, plays with me on like Grazing in the Grass. He said, man, there's this little song that, you know, you on that tape that with a little cowbell. And I said, yeah. He said, well, let's do that. Let's do that as a filler. Because Russ Regan said, listen, there's a song short here. So I said, oh, yeah, sure. So I mean, the bass line was dum-dum, bum-bum, bum-bum, bum, and the piano played, guitar, dang, 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 dang. It was really like easy. So we did it in half an hour. And we needed a guitar. And a friend of mine, Bruce Langhorne, was next door. He used to play for Odetta. And I met him through Harry Belafonte because one of Harry Belafonte's prodigies, Valentine Pringle, needed. So he used to like travel with him. That's how we got together. And he was next door and he loved South African music. So it was recording with Phil Ox, who was a big folk guy, yeah. And he came next door and he played the guitar part in one take, and then he held the cowbell and I played it with two sticks. And the record went out in February of 1968. We're playing at the Masonic Temple in Detroit in April of 1968, and Russ Regan was there. Now, we didn't follow the charts or the reports or anything. So I said, well, we're going to play like a single from our new LP, and the whole place stood up, and I went, what's the matter with these people? And we started playing this song live, and they went crazy, you know. They made us play it 4 times. And when we came off stage, I still wanted more, and I said to Russ, what is that all about? He said, fool, that's the #1 record in the country. That was the first time I found out. And of course from there was a roller coaster. And Grazing in the Grass went on to become a #1 4 times. I mean, it was with us, and then it was the Friends of Distinction. We gave them the license to do and then Kirk Whalum had the #1 jazz with it. And there was this guys, I think a few years ago, what were they called? They had a #1 with it, a couple of white guys. What were they called, man? I forget. But it's just been an amazing song, and it was in The Lost King of Scotland, and the soundtrack, it was in Bobby. It's been in all kinds of movies, and the song won't go away. When we're doing this UN International Jazz Day, we did Steamela in Paris, and we're going to do it here, but like Ban Ki-moon told them, listen, they come into my turf, they got to play Grazing in the Grass. And and he's from Korea, right? And Stevie Wonder said, I want to play on that song, so we're going to play it with Stevie. So it's an amazing song. It just won't go, and we can't go anywhere without playing it.
At age 14, after seeing the film Young Man with a Horn, which is a thinly veiled story modeled on the life of the legendary cornet player Vic Spiderbeck, our next guest was inspired to pick up a trumpet and hone his talent. He is considered one of South Africa's most influential individuals because his early protest music portrayed the struggles, passion against the Apartheid regime, which mirrored and captured the disillusionment of an entire nation. At through the trumpet, his heartache and suffering was enormous comfort to millions of oppressed souls and gave voice to the revolution. These conditions ultimately led him out of the country, and his triumphant career was launched. He symbolizes what the power and influence of jazz can achieve. Please welcome a true citizen of the world who performed his chart-topping hit, Grazing in the Grass, Hugh Masekela.
What does jazz music mean to you?
Well, I grew up later to find out it was called jazz. You know what I mean? But I grew up where like I've absorbed all kinds of music. And I never heard Louis Armstrong or Miles or Dizzy, I was very close to all these people. They said they were playing music, not jazz. Jazz is a media word. But let me put it this way. If Louis Armstrong hadn't happened, we probably still would be wearing white powdered wigs and those blue velvet suits that George Washington wore. Because he relaxed the world, but he brought it up the river. And then, he started like Associated Booking Corporation with Joe Glazier, because there was no real agency for black musicians in this country. And he brought everybody there. He brought Ella, he brought Sarah, he brought Duke, he brought Count, he brought everybody to ABC. And they took it out to the world. But the one thing that the music from New Orleans, that started out in New Orleans, did was it made the world realize that people of African origin were not slaves. They were very regal people. And ever since then, the whole world has been trying to talk like them, to walk like them, to dress like them, to dance like them, to sing like them, to cook like them. And modern recreational life all over the world is based on what the African American people brought out up the river from Chicago to the world, and it came up from New Orleans. It's like a science and an art form that really inspired people like me, and made us feel that we had a chance to reach excellence and show the world that when you see a black person, you have to respect them. Because if you try to talk like them and dance like them and sing like them and dress like them and all those things, they're making life fantastic for you. The amazing thing is that African Americans still haven't discovered that, it seems to me. And white people anywhere, groovy, cool, what's up, high five, all those things, they just they take them from us, When you look at it, you say, wow. But this is all ours. And in a year's time, when something is hot, they just take it and make it theirs, But we don't get the social credit for it. But let me tell you something. Through so-called jazz, the world was made African.
Oh, my dear old Aunt Harriet, way out in heaven will she be. Send me a sweet chariot for the end of the troubles of a sea. Hey. Oh, rocking Jack gets it, rocking Jack. Judgment day's almost here. To my own rocking chair. Oh yeah.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the Jazz Standard here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank Mr. Hugh Masekela for his time, as well as the staff and management here at the Jazz Standard. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Until next time, peace.